Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you to the Calcutta Debating Circle's Annual Debate 2025. It's an honor to stand before you today amidst a gathering of minds eager to engage in the timeless art of debate. This annual event is a testament to the spirit of intellectual curiosity and the pursuit of truth.
Our dignitaries, who will be, discussing one very important issue tonight, and the members of Calcutta Club and our guest, on behalf of the Committee of Management of Calcutta Club and myself, I welcome you all.
Before we start, friend, we remember somebody whom we believe is not with us in flesh and blood, but to borrow the phrase from Lion King, he lives in us, he lives with me.
And in many ways, politics today is the same as gambling. And that's the activity you need to do to get into power and be called government before you get into the act of what is called governance.
Sanjib, we miss you, but we are sure you're with us. We also remember this evening a few people whom we have lost in recent times who greatly contributed to the content of public discourse in our city. We remember Professor Shumon Mukherjee, and we remember Mr. Pankaj Dotto, the ex-Inspector General of Police, who kept the public discourse alive no matter what were the controversies, no matter what was the subject. What is a debate? What is a debate without the speakers? So without much ado, first of all, we are so grateful. I exactly had to make 8 phone calls to connect to 8 speakers, and all of them were so gracious and so spontaneous in accepting the invitation of Calcutta Debating Circle. It's a privilege to have amongst us somebody who dissects the clauses of law from being a scholar, from being a parliamentarian, from being a student par excellence, and now one of the most noted lawyers in the country. We are indeed honored to have amongst us Mr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi. Sir, Calcutta welcomes you. Please come, sir. Someone who's been at the center of events for a time, and someone whom we've known, interacted, who is absolutely without any kind of compromise, whether she is discussing constitutional reforms, whether she is discussing issues like the people who are languishing in the jails. We've heard her time and again, and we've heard her in the recent context as well. So once again, we welcome amongst us Vrinda Grover. Vrinda, please. After a long time, we were proud to be doctors. And we were proud of the fact, the boldness, the courage of conviction, the spontaneity which our medical fraternity responded to the events of the last 160 days. And it is our youngsters who did us proud. And representing the community of young doctors amongst us this evening, we have from AIIMS Kollani, from the Department of Accident and Emergency, Reekkanya Bagchi. Reekkanya, welcome. So I think most of us have just completed a course of antidepressants on the completion of the Border Gavaskar Trophy. And probably not many of you are old enough to remember the 1971 Indian tour of West Indies, when a certain Rajdeep Sardesai really stood up eyeball to the guiles of Gary Sobers and his team and carried Indian cricket forward. And continuing in the legacy of Rajdeep Sardesai, encountering every bouncer, fearless whether the track is either seaming or spinning. In able legacy of him is our dear friend, a great friend of our city whenever we called him, my dear friend Rajdeep Sardesai. Rajdeep on the desk. Thank you. So as the proposition settles down, another person, whether it was in the Middle East, whether it was in Kargil, whether it was in peacetime or in war, there was no hesitancy in her in facing up to whatever be the conflict situation. And over the last few days, she's been putting up with a nasty form of viral laryngitis. And in spite of that, she is amongst us today, a very dear friend, a huge token of gratitude for making this evening. Barkha Dutt. Barkha, please, with us. A young man who doesn't mince his words, whether he is questioning the Constitution or constituting questions, and has always some ideas up his sleeve, absolutely relevant, extremely pointed, the young mind of Arghya Sengupta, one of the country's leading experts in legal policy. Arghya, welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, we in Kolkata were very allergic to judges and chief justices in the recent past. But to every generalization, there has to be an exception. And an exception to that generalization is someone who is so sincere, who is so steadfast on his ideals, that he has had to experience the merry-go-round of going around from one high court to the other. But he remains an example of practicing what he believes in. Once again, a great friend of ours, the retired Chief Justice of Meghalaya High Court, Sanjib Banerjee. Sanjib, please come. In an evening when there will be a lot of logic, counter-logic, points and counterpoints, don't get misled when you hear the epithet of a bhakt. I was misled in the beginning when I didn't know who this young man was. He is anything but devoted, completely irreverential when he chooses to criticize whatever crosses his path, absolutely logical, well-researched, and I tell you, admire his fluency when he rattles out his points, statistics and data. One of India's most popular YouTubers, Akash Banerjee. Akash, welcome to Kolkata. Another quick round of introductions, Tanya.
I am proud to introduce our young interjectors. We are here recognizing them for their excellence in public speaking. The first member of the jury is Sampurna Sanyal. She's in second year at Presidency University. The next interjector is Ishan Banerjee. He's studying law at the Symbiosis Law School and he's in his first year there. He is followed by Abhinav Chatterjee. He's in class 11 at La Martiniere for boys. The next member is his classmate, Agnish Chatterjee, again class 11 from La Martiniere. Next we have the youngest member of our jury, Satakshi Ghosh. She's in class 9 in Mahadevi Birla World Academy. We then have Shirsha Banerjee. She is in the first year at St. Xavier's College. And rounding off the jury is Devdeepta Roy. He is in class 11 at St. Xavier's Collegiate School. Bhasha is also here. She's in class 11 and she studies at South Point. Please give them all a big round of applause. Thank you.
On the 9th of August 2025, Kolkata woke up to a situation it could scarcely believe. The city was angry. The state was outraged. There were thousands and thousands of people led by the doctors on the streets. But the question remains, is anger enough for justice? Is outrage enough for a conclusion? Are we playing a game of snakes and ladders which has more snakes than ladders? 150 days hence, let's have the calmness of mind and the sharpness of intellect to look at some of the questions involved. And on that note, we request Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, leading the proposition, to commence.
Mr. Chair, my esteemed co-panelists and debaters, distinguished members of this most distinguished audience, and it's truly a miracle to find so many people for a debate, not in my city, not in Delhi, not in most international cities. Friends, few things in India can be more axiomatic than the motion in whose favor I get up to speak. I should know. I've spent 44 years in this profession. Indeed, without exaggeration, to repeat this proposition, namely that justice is often demanded but seldom delivered, to repeat it is to rest our case. Justice is truly a song we love to sing, but seldom do we see it take to wing. जरा तारीख पर तारीख जहां मिलती रहती है वहां इंसाफ मर जाता है. शायर ने सही कहा है कि दोपहर तक बिक गया बाजार का हर झूठ, और मैं एक अपने सच को लेकर शाम तक बैठा रहा. Friends, let's look at any number of diverse parameters and criteria to see if those who propose and support the motion are right or not. The first one, of course, I've been speaking on reforms in the administration of justice for 25 odd years. Under our noses, while we speak, while we debate, while we have committees, while we have commissions, while we have reports, the arrears in this country have gone up from 3.25 odd crores pre-COVID to 5.10 odd crores post-COVID. That's the position under our noses. In fact, I love to quote my famous wag in the light of so many recommendations and committees. He said, committee is a group of the unfit appointed by the unwilling to do the unnecessary. Second, friends, at any time after independence, 75th birthday is on, any time after independence, 1/3 of all our high courts seats have been vacant. For a country of 140 odd crores, we have 1100 odd high court judges. I'm not giving exact figures. At any point of time, 1/3 have been vacant. Can you do more than demand justice and seldom deliver it? 1/4 of all district courts, roughly 25,000, 1/4 at all times vacant, every day, every time of these 75 years. And you talk about delivery of justice? There is this great joke that many decades ago, and the judge on the panel will remember, I think 15 years ago, all the high courts' sanction strength was increased. Most high courts for the last several years are functioning below the original unincreased sanction strength. That is the true position. Duration of pendency of cases is a good statistic. We have nationally so many cases pending, but above 10 years, 15.5 lakhs in all the high courts put together. Above 5 to 10 years, 16 lakhs. District courts put together, above 10 years, 48 lakh cases pending. And above from 5 to 10 years, 1 crore cases pending. Take any other parameter, enforcement of contracts, of promises. Stability in society comes from that. We are ranked a measly 163 out of 190 nations. Our conviction rates, where we are lucky, is 20%, 15%, normally 5 to 10% in many statutes. The saying goes that if a crime is committed, a criminal will not be identified. If he is identified, he will escape prosecution. If prosecuted, he will not be arrested. If arrested, he will not be convicted. If convicted, he will be released on appeal. That is the sad truth in statistical terms. In civil courts, the Privy Council more than 100 years ago said, in civil matters, the woes of a decree holder in India start after the date when he obtains the decree. What a pitiful comment on realization of dues which you have won in. Well, friends, I would be a preacher, a academic, hortatory, rhetorical speaker if I did not end by giving some concrete suggestions. It is not that this is not curable, but today the position is that the proposition before this august house is axiomatic. But the remedial measures are practical, nitty-gritty. As Thomas Hardy said, take care of the small things, the big things will take care of themselves. One, increase the judge per million population ratio, which has crawled because of Supreme Court exhortations from 11 odd 20 years ago to 21. 11 judges per million of population to 21. A good figure is 30, but the better figure is 50. You have to do something, because otherwise you are talking of hospitals with equipment and bright new buildings, but no doctors. Quality is equally important as much as quantity. You must stop this practice. If I was to pick up 5 of you unknown non-lawyers and put a blindfold on your eyes and send you to 5 high courts to find the 5 best persons to appoint to the high court, you'll be able to find it in 1 month. Having done that appointment, we then find ways of disappointing them instead of appointing them. That must stop. The quality is as important. Third, penalties for adjournment must be more severe. Fourth, you must have a ruthless evaluation performance index for judges, which is a combined index not of numbers but of quality of disposal, the reversals they suffer, etc. 5, you must start screening these cases. 5 crores is possibly a pack of cards. If you screen these cases, many of them would be infructuous. But you have no system to screen the really old ones. Call the people, force the notice, force the hearing, and get a result. They will collapse like a pack of cards. 6th, fast track courts. We had a non-ambitious target of 1,023 fast track courts. We have been functioning on an average with 723 fast track courts. The minimum correct number would be 5,000 fast track courts for specific subjects, for women, for certain crimes against children, things like that. We are nowhere near that. There is no reason why resource allocation for that is not done immediately. 7th, the use of ad hoc judges, a provision for last 50 odd years in our constitution, used hardly 5 or 7 times. You can appoint retired judges from the same Supreme Court or from the same High Court after retirement to that High Court or another High Court or to the Supreme Court. These are tried, tested people who can do a bridging, filling gap while you search and while you play the politics of the judiciary in appointment and disappointment. But you've used this power hardly, maybe a total of 10 times in 50 years in the whole country, High Courts and Supreme Court included. We must have a system, that's the number 8, where we are able to announce the successor to a judicial vacancy at least 1 month before the incumbent retires. There is no reason why absolute micro-tracking by a dedicated office and a ministry for that purpose achieves that. Friends, I will end before time by saying that otherwise, even a legal victory without timely justice is nothing but a moral defeat or a Pyrrhic victory. The demand for justice reflects hope. The failure to deliver it breeds despair. And it's a cycle we have not been able to break in 75 years of our republic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Like a good doctor, you diagnosed the problem and gave us a set of prescriptions. And that brings to mind that probably the longest case that ever ran in India was for 72 years, and that case was finally heard by a judge who was born after the case was filed. So I think there is a lot of catching up to do. We've had a very pointed, specific diagnosis and a very sharp set of recommendations, but does our dear friend Arghya agree with the same?
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a very sad day today. It's a sad day because despite this accurate diagnosis and prescription that Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi has laid out before you, I am deeply despondent if a leading member of the bar, a real jewel of the bar, stands before you today and says that our justice system has failed. Because if he and Ms. Grover, who are two leading lights of the Indian Supreme Court, cannot get justice from their brethren who are sitting as judges, then who are we to debate against this motion? It's a non-debate, ladies and gentlemen, as he himself put it. It is axiomatic. We cannot debate this motion. So, ladies and gentlemen, I cannot come before you today with a clean conscience and say that justice is demanded but also delivered. That ended for me the day when, as an 8-year-old, I watched Sunny Deol in Damini saying, "Insaf nahi mila, Lord, milord, sirf mila hai Tariq." That's the day that any chance of getting justice ended. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we will say something more fundamentally against this motion, that justice is never demanded in the first place. Let us not fool ourselves into believing that we demand justice. What we demand is personal benefit. We demand vengeance. Maybe on the odd occasion it is justice, but not on the whole. This is not a new phenomenon. Let's go back to the first trial that happened in India. It's not very far away from here. The trial of Maharaja Nandakumar happened, which was presided over by Chief Justice Elijah Impey, who was the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Calcutta, prosecuted by Warren Hastings. Now, what did Hastings want from this trial? He didn't want justice. What he wanted was to get Nandakumar out of the way because he had been a wily zamindar who had been a thorn in the colonial flesh. What did the other people who were named in the will want? They wanted a bigger share in the pie, and so they wanted Nandakumar executed for forgery. Nobody wanted justice, ladies and gentlemen. They wanted personal benefit and they wanted vengeance. Fast forward 238 years to a cold winter day in Delhi when a young physiotherapist was left for dead by the side of the road after being brutally raped after she had gone to watch a movie, The Life of Pi, with her boyfriend. 6 people were caught. There was great public anger and anguish with Nirbhaya. What did people want? The death penalty. 5 of them were hanged. What did people want further? They wanted death penalty for all rapists. And so there was a law that was passed that rape together with murder will lead to the death penalty. We didn't stop there. In a rare moment of consensus, the BJP and the Congress agreed that in the rarest of the rare case, there should even be chemical castration of rapists. And that was a debate in Parliament. Let us not fool ourselves, ladies and gentlemen. Demands for chemical castration and death penalty are not demands for justice. They are demands for a barbarism of the rapist to be countered by the state-sponsored barbarism of the death penalty and castration. So you can ask me, what is justice? So if you were to go back to Aristotle, Aristotle broadly said that justice essentially means fairness. But when the NDA government in its second term slashed the corporate tax rate from 30% to 22%, largely in the media, despite the fact that the income tax for the salaried classes remained high, largely in the media, did we all stand up and say that this is injustice? No. It was lauded for saying that this is facilitating ease of doing business. Again, when the same government brought in an economic weaker sections quota, 10% quota for poor people, whether they were Hindus, Muslims or Christians, as long as they were not beneficiaries of reservation, this was a poverty alleviation measure, but it was widely criticized as an upper caste quota, despite the fact that poor Muslims and Christians also got the benefit of this quota. I am not playing politics here, but the fact is we don't stand up for justice. We stand up when there is personal benefit. Now, Dr. Singhvi spoke about the justice system and how the justice system has failed to deliver, and he gave all the statistics, and I am not taking any issue with him there. But the fact is that even if someone were to still go to the justice system, what happens? As he said, 20% of subordinate judiciary positions are vacant, 30% of high court positions are vacant. Even if somebody does make it to the court, out of 665 district court complexes in the country, 100 of them do not even have a single toilet for women. So no one wants to go to court in the first place. And even if someone were to transcend that barrier, 1,028 rupees loss in daily earnings is what someone would get if they went to court, and possibly at the end of it all they would get is another tariq. Now, who would demand justice? Dr. Singhvi is wrong in one respect. There is one section that can demand justice and get justice delivered. With no disrespect, those who can afford Dr. Singhvi. That's one section who can do it. And he's brilliant. And the data shows very clearly, this is done by my own think tank, that when a senior advocate is taken in the Supreme Court, the chances of getting relief increase to 60%. Dr. Singhvi does a lot of pro bono cases, and we must laud him for that. But the statistical truth is that only the rich in India can demand and get justice delivered. The poor can only hope and pray for it. But ladies and gentlemen, we must expand this. We must expand this to look beyond the courts. And the reason we must go beyond the courts, and here Rajdeep, I will speak on topics that you know, is that justice isn't really about the courts. Justice should really be about what we are asking our elected representatives. And what are we asking our elected representatives? What are the issues that form the crux of the elections most of the time? In the lead up to the 2024 general elections, it was Ayodhya and the restoration of Hindu pride. Is that a demand for justice? I don't think I have to answer that rhetorical question. If we look at any state elections, and Rajdeep and Barkha are both here and they can talk about it till the cows come home. What is the issue? The issues are Kanya Shri, Bhagya Lakshmi, Larki Bahin. What are these issues? These issues are essentially demand for personal benefits which the governments of the day are responding with cash. We don't demand justice, ladies and gentlemen, of our elected representatives. We are now a state where we are rent seeking, we are demanding personal benefit. So what is, and I'll conclude with this, what is a demand for justice? It's not as if it doesn't happen all the time. But as the motion today says, it is not often demanded. There is an exception. As Dr. Sarkar said right in the beginning, the exception not far away is a genuine demand for justice by the junior doctors front after the Arghya hospital incident. That demand is not a demand that is only limited to fair trial and speedy trial of the accused. It is also a demand that government spend 4% of their GDP on public health care so that doctors have better facilities. It is also a demand that junior doctors are treated with dignity so that they don't have to sleep in their meeting rooms in public hospitals when they are on a night shift. It is a demand for respect. It is a demand for dignity. But ladies and gentlemen, that demand is being extinguished as we speak. It is a one-off. It doesn't happen often. Earlier this week, I saw that the junior doctors were marching from College Street to Shambhajar, but no one was really talking about it. Ladies and gentlemen, that day, when demands like the Arghya case and the protests of the junior doctors happen often, that is the day when I will be happy to lose this debate. But that doesn't happen often, ladies and gentlemen. We are still at a stage where justice is not demanded. So till that time, since I am in Kolkata, I can't resist the temptation, and we have a debate on justice. Let us remember the words of Kazi Nazrul Islam, who said, "Mohabidrohi ronoklanto ami shei din hobo shanto, jobe utpiriter krondonoroll akashe batashe dhonibe na, ottacharir khorgo kripan bhim ronobhume ronibe na." On that ideal day, ladies and gentlemen, when justice is done, this side will win the debate. Till that time, today, I urge you to do this motion justice and defeat it comprehensively. Thank you.
Arghya, well done indeed. You know, Ravichandran Ashwin may have retired, but you have bowled a series of googlies and really almost sounded like, you know, Aristotle's disillusionment with justice almost sounds like Socrates' disillusionment with democracy. Let it not end in the cup of hemlock. And to spring up the defense once again, the pendulum swings towards the proposition, and we have Vrinda Grover. Vrinda, the floor is yours. You have a lot of googlies to defend.
Friends on the dais and members of the House, first of all, I think I should begin with thanking Mr. Sengupta, who I think defected to our side by actually very evocatively telling you that justice is not delivered. He tried to nihilistically annihilate the proposition itself, which to my mind, by citing select examples, was actually to take away the very spirit of justice, which I thought his proposition was to defend. Dr. Sarkar said he bowled a few googlies. I think he also bowled a self-goal. As the pendulum of today's motion, justice is often demanded but seldom delivered, oscillates between the forces of demand and supply. To advance my arguments in favor of this proposition, I will probe the economics of the marketplace of justice as it intersects with the axis of marginalization. I do believe I will be able to persuade you in favor of the motion. Revolutions have been sparked by the quest for justice. As Freud wrote in 1930, the first requisite of civilization is that of justice. It would be therefore quite myopic and misleading to restrict our conceptualization of justice to adjudication and verdicts delivered by a court of law through litigation. The preamble of the Indian Constitution encapsulates this notion holistically yet pithily: justice, social, economic, and political, thereby embracing Dr. Ambedkar's vision that justice has always evoked the ideas of equality. Often people believe that court is the only forum for dispensation of justice. This, in my view, is a fundamental error, as it miscalculates the inherent limitations of the judicial process. Courts, especially criminal courts, are an adversarial forum scaffolded by legal regimes of procedure and evidence. A criminal court is devised to discover the forensic truth, not to exhume the absolute truth. The determination of innocence or guilt, the verdict of acquittal or conviction, is a distillation of the evidence marshaled before the court. Dr. Singhvi, leading the charge in favor of the motion, placed before you some of the infirmities and shortcomings. I will add to those statistics. A highly inadequate and debilitating judicial infrastructure, coupled with political apathy in resourcing the same, confirms the legal maxim, justice delayed is justice denied. The data published by the Ministry of Law and Justice on 1st January 2025 shows that the sanction strength of judicial officers, judges in the High Court in India is 1,122, of which 371, or roughly 33% judicial posts are lying vacant. As per the National Judicial Data Grid, the district court level, there are about 4 crore 53 lakh cases pending, which roughly amounts to 65,000 cases in each district court. Given the crippling workload, can and will the courts deliver justice? But delay is not just an administrative glitch that technology or reports of policy think tanks will fix. The reason for this institutional intransigence are also rooted in prejudice. Take the experience of Bhavri Devi, a government village level worker in Rajasthan who was gang raped in 1995 by 5 men from the dominant caste for opposing child marriage. All 5 accused were acquitted in 1995 on dubious reasoning. Almost 3 decades later, Bhavari's appeal against acquittals is yet to be heard by the Rajasthan High Court. Bhavari's hostile encounter with the legal process, however, led to the enunciation of the Vishakha guidelines by the Supreme Court in 1997 to secure safety and dignity for women at the workplace. In Bhavari's words, "Mujhe to nyay nahi mila, magar meri behan betiyon ko milega." The endemic delay and uncertainties in the delivery of justice, coupled with a rising crime graph, trigger social anxiety. Preying on such fears, the 4 suspects arrested for the rape and murder of Disha, the veterinary doctor in Hyderabad, was shot dead by the police in alleged encounter killing in December 2019. The public applauded the encounter, for the police had delivered instant justice, and the police proclaimed, "See, law has done its duty." The Justice Sirpurkar Commission of Inquiry appointed by the Supreme Court, however, concluded that 4 suspects were killed in cold blood and recommended that all 10 policemen be tried for murder. The inquiry revealed that 3 of those killed were juveniles belonging to a primitive tribal group, and the evidence linking all 4 to the heinous crime was speculative and tenuous. These extrajudicial killings have left even more families bereft, seeking answers, justice, and closure. The American writer James Baldwin said, "If one really wishes to know how justice is administered in a country, one does not question the policemen, the lawyers, the judges, or the protected members of the middle class. One goes to the unprotected, those precisely who need the law's protection most, and listen to their testimony." The only offense recognized by the Indian Constitution is untouchability, with an absolute prohibition on its practice by state and society. This week, the Madras High Court, while awarding compensation for the death of a manual scavenger cleaning a sewer, termed it homicide by an insensitive society. In the era of AI and unprecedented technological breakthroughs, Dalit lives remain dispensable. Injustice persists due to our callousness, our casteism. Growing up in Delhi, 1984 was a formative year in my life as I witnessed the anti-Sikh massacre. The electoral map of India etches an unbroken and ascending graph of rich dividends for those who plan, incite, and sponsor targeted violence against minorities. It is we, the people, who vote them into power. Our ballots sanctify their egregious crimes and assure impunity. Justice eludes victims of mass crimes who become pawns in political skirmishes. 40 years ago, in the early hours of December 3rd, 1984, a poisonous gas leaked from the Union Carbide pesticide factory in Bhopal, leaving more than 22,000 dead and over 500,000 persons injured. Today, the drinking water in the area remains contaminated and children are still born with birth defects. For the world's worst industrial disaster, the American CEO was arrested for a few hours and released. Union Carbide was taken over by Dow Chemicals, who claims it has no corporate responsibility for the devastation. English language and the legal lexicon fell short and a new word was coined, and the crime of genocide created under international law, to describe and create accountability for the perpetrators of the Holocaust. In February 2024, the highest international court, the ICJ, ruled that the ongoing relentless attack on Gaza could amount to genocide. Can the injured, maimed, orphaned, starving, displaced children of Gaza, Palestine, dream of justice as they are being obliterated? I wonder if these bleak times signal a prophetic message and moment of change. In conclusion, perhaps we can draw some hope for changing what is often demanded but seldom delivered, so that there is more parity in the equation, and draw some hope from the words of Arundhati Roy. The idea of justice, even dreaming about justice, is a revolutionary act. Thank you.
Thank you, Vrinda. You were really neither swayed nor distracted with the definition that Arghya put in front of you. You really stuck to your guns, and you pointed out to us in such graphic detail that what were the shortcomings of the system today. We live under very strange situations. India produces more and more doctors whilst the healthcare capacity remains stagnant. India produces more and more lawyers even though the number of judges remains constant. Let us see what definition of reality now comes from Barkha Dutt.
Ladies and gentlemen on the stage, it's brilliant to see young debaters, and above all, it's so wonderful to see an audience this large for a public-spirited debate. So before we get into the arguments, let's have a round of applause for this wonderful audience here in Kolkata. And Dr. Sarkar, thank you for persuading me to come. I stand up here today to argue, as my colleague Mr. Sengupta just did, that the proposition today is entirely flawed. Those advocating in support of this proposition seem to have read only half the sentence. Half the sentence. Can we all read this sentence once again? Justice is often demanded, but it is seldom delivered. Dr. Singhvi and Vrinda Grover, with great respect, I love both of them, I think they read only the second part of the sentence and forgot to look at the first part of the sentence. The first part of the proposition presupposes, before we can get into whether justice is delivered or not, we have to agree, is justice often demanded? And I'm here to argue, unfortunately, that as a people, hand on our heart, how consistent are we about demanding justice when it does not directly impact us? At the best of times, we are insular, self-serving, selective, inconsistent. How many times have we walked away, or have we been urged to walk away from an accident victim as we're driving past on the road? How many times have we had a relative or a caring friend tell us, "Thoda kam bolo social media pe, bahut bolte ho, you'll get into trouble in this mahal." How many times have we chosen to remain silent when something makes us uncomfortable? Like the story of a young boy in Uttar Pradesh who was thrown out of school because he carried biryani. He carried biryani. A young Muslim boy was thrown out of school because he carried biryani to school. How many of us spoke up? Or how many of us spoke up about the elderly gentleman beaten in a train on suspicions of carrying meat? Let's pause here and talk about a young journalist called Mukesh Chandrakar. If any of you have heard of him, please raise your hand. I'm delighted to see this, Calcutta. You're a very special city. That's all I will say. But I will also have to confess that unlike the media elite represented by people like me, Rajdeep and Akash Banerjee on this stage, this young boy works in a district in Chhattisgarh. He was reporting on corruption in the giving of the contracts for road building. His body was found in a septic tank. His heart was ripped out. His liver was found in 5 pieces. He had 15 fractures to his head. How much noise have you heard about justice for Mukesh? Yes, I stand here in a city today whose young people, even old people, bravely came together as one to demand justice for the victim of RG. The last 6 months, much of my reporting life has, in fact, as Dr. Sarkar would testify, with the number of times he's appeared on my show, have been devoted to every twist and turn of that horror that took place when a young woman went to her place of work and never came back because she was raped and murdered. So hats off to all of you who did in that moment ask for justice. But where are you today? Where are we today 6 months later? We do not even know if the crime scene was accurately identified. We have reason to believe that she was not killed where her body was recovered. And yet, where is the noise? We, even as people, have already moved on. The doctors who are here, I've been talking to many of them, and they make the point that they can scarcely get the media to cover the story anymore. So is justice often demanded, or is justice sometimes demanded? This is not a sophist's argument. It is moot. It is central to the conversation we're having today. Vrinda mentioned Bhavri Devi. I'm so glad that she mentioned the story of Bhavri Devi because it was in my notes to talk about her. As a young reporter at NDTV when Rajdeep was my boss, it was one of the first reporting assignments I was sent out to cover. I knew nothing about caste. I was this sort of elite, completely deracinated graduate of St. Stephen's College, Delhi University. I did not even understand how, at that time, how a woman could be raped because she was Dalit. Not just because she was female, but also because she was Dalit. Among the men who raped her was the father of a 1-year-old child whose child marriage Bhavri Devi was trying to stop. When the case went to court, the court said this could not have been rape because men of an upper caste would not have touched the woman of a lower caste. Bhavri Devi gave women like me protection at the workplace. It is thanks to her fight that we today are protected by sexual harassment guidelines called the Vishakha guidelines at the workplace. But how many of us speak for Bhavri Devi today as people? Isn't Bhavri Devi a forgotten footnote of history? Is justice really often demanded? Or do we just move on, we in the media being the most guilty of all, from one headline to another? Finally, you may think the kangaroo courts that you see on your television screens, all that noise about who's guilty and who's innocent, what's just and what's not just, is a version of justice. I'm here to tell you, as a practitioner of that space for 20 odd years, it is anything but. That is the reverse of the demand for justice. That is simply entertainment, theatrics, eyeball chasing, reductionism, no application of intelligent complexity, nothing. There's no interest. I think Arghya made this point that what has changed from Nirbhaya to RG? What has changed for women? If justice was often demanded, 85 Indian women would not be raped every single day with less than a 30% conviction rate. Is justice often demanded? Do we come out on the streets for Mukesh Chandrakar? Do we come out on the streets for Bhavri Devi? Do we even come out on the streets for the RG victim anymore? Have we not left our doctors completely lonely, isolated, beleaguered, yet still soldiering on somehow? Nor are those headline-making encounter deaths a version of justice. In fact, they're a corrosion of justice. And yet there are entire glorified Bollywood movies made about encounter cops who are presented as some sort of alter heroes who basically think that the justice system is too slow. Is that what the proposition is advocating? Let's just take them off the streets and knock them dead because there's no justice? Encounter killings, bulldozers, kangaroo courts on television screens. No, my friends, this is not a demand for justice. The proposition today is flawed because the proposition is arguing from a lament about the slow wheels of justice, the backlog in courts, the fact that there's tariq pe tariq. We know all this. That's correct. We're not here to dispute those facts that are axiomatic and obvious. What we're here to dispute is what we're doing about it. The proposition presupposes that we do all the time, consistently speak up. The truth is that we have become an even more silent people than we've ever been. I know so many people today who do not speak their mind. So many people who are scared by the polarizing environment of social media, who don't want trolls to come after them, who in fact will modulate their stated opinion in a drawing room or on Twitter or on Facebook because they want to sort of get mixed up with the herd. Nobody wants to stand apart, stand alone sometimes and ask for justice. And nobody wants to ask for justice when it doesn't directly impact you. Hell, let me take it one step further. We are so numb and inured that we don't even ask for justice when it impacts us directly. Do you know that, I say this as an asthmatic whom has been very sick the last 10 days, data tells you that we as Indians will lose 5.5 years of our life on average because of the air that we breathe. Do you know that only 10% of people polled in my city said that this was the issue on which they would vote? We don't even demand justice for ourselves. How can we possibly defend a motion which assumes that we are an enlightened, consistent, always compassionate, always nuanced, always thoughtful society that does not leave victims behind, even when they are our own victims, our own people? We do not demand justice, hence justice cannot be delivered. Thank you.
Barkha, thank you. Questions which were very painful to ask, and it will be even more painful to answer. A spasm is not equal to a sustained effort, and herein the opposition raises a fundamental point, that are we pretending to seek justice or have we really sought justice? And it is at that particular juncture this evening that the junior doctors come into the focus, and let us see, speaking as an embodiment of that protest that shook our society, that brought thousands and thousands out on the road, is Reekkanya Bagchi from AIIMS Kolani. Reekkanya, floor is yours.
Okay. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks to the moderator and chair for such a warm introduction. I think I am very happy to see such a large audience hearing me out. And as the opposition said, that there's no question for the motion. We all believe that justice, which is often demanded, is very seldom delivered. They have a different way of and a perspective to put forward. I would like to see if after I put my argument forward, how much I can change this house towards my room. So I am here standing as a worried citizen of India, but a very proud junior doctor of the state Bengal. Although I feel honored to speak among this esteemed panel, I unfortunately have seen this motion play out in reality, which left me completely disillusioned. So I will speak for the motion that justice is often demanded but seldom delivered. From the time immemorial, this planet has seen Galileo cry for justice, but in spite of the demand, he was subjected to trial in 1633. After the requiem of Galileo, the world should have learned the lesson that we need to punish murderers and not ideas, and we should uphold the truth without any delay. But unfortunately, even today what we see, that justice, even the demanded and very sincerely demanded, to answer a little bit, the opposition said that we do it, we demand justice only when we have to gain something out of it. I would like to question everybody, this intelligent audience and my panelists, propositions and oppositions alike, that me, who's standing almost 2 to 3 decades younger than you, what did we gain heading to the streets and demanding justice? We are that generation who are often labeled as self-centered, always glued to media, AI, gaming, or mostly happy with social media content. We are that generation with that label who went to the street, stayed on the street, went back to work, went back to our educational institutions, served thousands of patients, and came back to the streets to eat our dinner and stay up all night to just demand justice. What did we gain? Why did we do this? We did this because we want a better society for us and for our next generation. The womb, the motherland that we took birth in India, we did not inherit a very good environment or air to breathe in, unfortunately. What our elders couldn't cleanse, we are trying to change. This can't be our fault, can it be? Now coming to a very pertinent question. As a junior doctor of this country, and especially of the state Bengal, I'm afraid I won't be able to beat around the bush right now, stating different other cases. I think there are better speakers who can do it. I have witnessed an unprecedented uproar and demand for justice in this state Bengal, in my city Kolkata. When my female colleague was allegedly raped and murdered when she was serving 36 hours and saving breathless patients. That day itself, when the thing happened and came into light, some other female doctor, my friend, went for an emergency duty. Without CCTV, without proper safety mechanism, and with the whole foul play in front. Why are we doing this? And with that conviction, we are asking for justice. We are demanding justice. If you ask me personally, what did we gain? And also another question that was put forward by Barkha Dutt madam, that what are they, like some doctors are still like continuing the process of demand and there's nobody. Then I would like to mention that yesterday and day before there has been public demonstration where not only doctors but non-medicals alike and people who are differently abled have been with us on the streets the whole night asking and demanding justice for no personal gain. And if you don't believe me, please switch on your smartphones, get the Facebook on, open Ashfaqulla Naiya's page, a young doctor, Arghya, and check if how many differently able people have been living on the streets to just demand justice in this winter cold. I would like to say, why is this actually happening? What we have seen that according to 2024 report, there has been 50 million pending cases where either the hearing are not enoughly heard or the accused has some form of agenda to put forward to delay the process of justice. So here, this country without the judiciary system, bringing up new reforms to change the pathway of delivery of justice, be it AI. I would like to say that I am not the best person to advise, especially on a panel of such eminent people who can give advices to the judiciary, but I believe that AI, which is so much sought after nowadays, can be used to actually tackle cases which can be tackled easily, segregate cases which requires immediate attention or not, and the cases like rapes, murders, where punishment is very important to set an example, needs to be done on a fast track without vacations. I would like to say that if our judicial system, we are not questioning their sense of justice, we are questioning their timely delivery. Like in anti-Sikh riots, we saw so many cases being filed in 1984 and some judicial resolution only happening in 2018. What do we do with that justice? The young masses of India is asking this question. I would like to bring forward few questions which lingers in terms of my colleague Abhaya. As shared on media, when Supreme Court proceedings were televised about our safety, about the things, the reports that are coming up, which was not the ground reality regarding CCTVs, regarding duty hours, regarding various other things, the actual criminal proceedings were not televised, rather the parents were not allowed to attend every hearing. Why was that done? That called for discrepancies. And if justice will be delivered after 5 long months of wait, or maybe more, we don't know, will that be a justice that with which we can actually live our life hence as young adults? When in an ER, I work in an ER, when in an ER after RGCOR, several patient parties come and some good ones, some bad ones, some people they come at 3 o'clock in the night and they say, Arekta RGCOR kore debo. As a young female doctor, I can't look in their eyes and say that apni jodi arekta RGCOR kore den, tale amra RGCOR er moto punishment apnake dite parbo, because our judicial system doesn't allow us the time delivery of it. Similarly, I would like to put forward the CSFL report and the post-mortem report stated, death was due to effects of manual strangulation associated with smothering. As a clinician and I think as an intelligent audience, you all know that it is not possible for a single man to do both. Even if we take it as the same, okay, one person has done it. There were multiple fingertip marks found around the mouth, which showed that there must be a change of hands. And then, what do we come to? Then she must have screamed, but the nursing station was 10 feet away. So I believe it is like very point blank truth. What we are doing with justice and the system of delivery is not adequate. I have used up all my time, so I will just end very, very quickly with a Shukanto Bhattacharya quote that Dridho Sotyer dite hobe khati dam, he Swadesh fer ei kotha janlam. Jane na to keu prithibi utheche kede, dhoreche mitha sotyer tuti chepe. We need to break that, we need to find justice and its delivery. Thank you so much.
Reekkanya, thank you. Very passionate, very sincere. And it is through your generation that we need a retuning of our attitudes. You see, unfortunately, the interpretations of the Abhaya case, she finds haloed company in her death, has almost become like the John F. Kennedy assassination, where the single killer theory became the government version and the three gunmen theory became the opposition version. And right here today, instead of being a forensic argument, instead of being a legal argument, whether it is a single assailant or a multiple assailant, has become a political question and not a question of law or investigation. The poor girl can at least find solace that she has John F. Kennedy for company. Anyway, on that note, Sanjib, our young colleague has asked us very pointed questions. Sanjib, what have we got to offer to the future?
Mr. Chairman, sir, the flavor of the evening is judiciary bashing. More precisely, judge bashing. And what better recipe than two leading lawyers and a media celebrity to do it?
At least it's not doctors bashing for a change.
But before I take such misconceived charge head on, I want to dwell on the larger sense of justice because the topic is much more than the judicial system or the judiciary or the resolution of inter-parties disputes in courts of law. To be honest, even after nearly 18 years as a High Court judge, I don't think I have the confidence to explain justice to anyone with the satisfactory degree of clarity. But for the moment, let me confine myself to justice as referred to in the preamble of the Constitution. The preamble to the Constitution, which declares the intent and purpose of the Suprema Lex, spells out the nature of justice, liberty and equality that every citizen of the Republic is entitled to enjoy. And all this for a goal of promoting among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity of the nation. The principle of justice enshrined in the Constitution is to bring about social, economic and political parity so that there is harmony in society. The idea of justice that the Constitution conveys appears more to do with removal of injustice and ensure a level of equality and equal opportunity to be brought about. Philosopher, social scientist and Harvard professor John Rawls, in his magnum opus of 1971, A Theory of Justice, spoke of justice being nothing but fairness. And he perceived that this justice as fairness was a core component of constitutional democracy. And he perceived that every institution had to be founded on this principle of justice being fair and justice being available to all as a fundamental social structure. In his critique of a theory of justice, our own Professor Amartya Sen, in his idea of justice, agreed that justice was, in a sense, a kind of fairness. But he moved away from the Niti-centric view that Rawls propagated to a Nyaya-centric view. And at the end, Professor Sen concludes that the best way to do justice is to remove injustice. Social justice, ladies and gentlemen, is to remove the discrimination in society, and I will not elaborate on that. Economic justice is to ensure that people have opportunities irrespective of their financial or economic situations. As for political justice, every qualified citizen should have a free and fair opportunity to participate in the electoral process and in government processes. If justice is viewed from such perspective, the Republic has taken giant strides. With the ever-increasing physical and virtual connectivity, the rural-urban divide has been greatly reduced and aspirations raised across the length and breadth of the country. An urban settlement today in India is never too far from a rural setting, except in the mountains and deserts. By and large, primary and basic education is no longer a luxury, and despite varying standards, even higher education is no longer the domain of the rich and the influential. With the accelerated demolition of the old social order, we now have children of once lesser gods adorning the highest offices in most areas, and a number of them with great distinction and as of right. Concerns still remain, but a country and its people impoverished by centuries of plundering and colonial abuse now counts itself in the highest echelons, not by its sheer numbers, but by its many achievers. In the initial months of the Republic, just after the Constitution was adopted, the elitist judiciary ran into problems with the executive because the elitist judiciary felt that the right to property and the right to land was something very fundamental and essential. Even though the political class of the day also came from elitist families, but they had a better connect with the people and realized that land had to be freed from the landed gentry for the purpose of development. Thus began a tussle between the judiciary on the one hand and the legislature and the executive on the other, a tussle that continues hopefully still today and which is desirable in the interest of democracy. With the churning of the Indian society and education becoming more widespread, the elitist culture of the higher judiciary eroded, and by the 1980s, the Supreme Court became so progressive that several of its key judgments were described as judicial activism, which in short implies straying into the legislative or executive domains and not maintaining the Lakshman Rekha. Yet it is widely acknowledged that a lot of good was bestowed on citizens by several of such judgments of the higher judiciary than may have been possible by the political executive. It, however, rankles, and is a matter of regret, that the highest court of the land could not defend the country at its darkest hour. But as if to atone for the mistakes of the 1970s, the 1980s began with a slew of judgments in public interest. Whether it was the case of the pavement dwellers or of the lower castes being brutalized by upper castes in several states in northern India, the Supreme Court passed orders from saving jungles to protecting clean air and water. Now, for the last couple of minutes, let me dwell on the core functioning of the judiciary and what the topic really insinuates. The topic suggests that the judiciary has failed to deliver. But how often do we stop and ask ourselves, what have we given it? Have we armed it to deliver? If we go by a 1980 judgment of the Supreme Court, we should have had 180,000 judges in the country. But today we have a little more than 23,000 sanctioned posts, counting from the Civil Judge Junior Division appointed yesterday right up to the Chief Justice of India. The judge population ratio is only marginally better than the police population ratio in this country. But for all the good work that has been delivered by the Indian judiciary, from cleaning up towns to recognize the rights of the third and indeterminate gender, there has been some justifiable criticism of the Supreme Court in recent times that has been riding roughshod over minority rights. I don't think the Supreme Court has completely genuflected before the executive, but there is a disturbing trend of intolerance of dissent, which we must recognize. To conclude, I would say that a lot has been done in this country if you remember the state that we were in 1947 and where we are now. Yet, a lot of work needs to be done. I have a dream that my children will live in a country where they are judged not by the God of their choice or the food on their plate, but by the content of their character. And I hope that into that heaven of freedom, my country soon awakes. God bless you all. Jai Hind.
Sanjib, very, very, very comprehensive. But we do get a bit worried when we hear that justices has been whispering with the divinity. So we do get a bit worried when we hear of such instances. You did mention of colonial influence. So the great Thomas Babington Macaulay, who lived not far away from here, right? So Babington authored the colonial penal code. I believe Macaulay never practiced law himself. Huh? Yeah, he never practiced law at all. But currently, your current version of the Nyaya Samhita has a lot of input by the parliamentarians, 40% of whom have criminal record. So I think they are probably putting down their experience in there, right? So we really vacillate between the sublime and the ridiculous. And on that note, we invite Rajdeep Sardesai to the podium. Rajdeep.
Thank you very much, Chairman Sir. My colleagues in the proposition, my worthy opponents whose false smiles only conceal their sheer embarrassment at having to defend the seemingly indefensible, members of the Calcutta Debating Society and Calcutta Club here, all of whom know in their heart of hearts that the criminal justice system in this country is broken. Let's cut the crap that we've heard for the last 40 minutes and admit it. I find it bizarre, frankly undergraduate, that members of the opposition have chosen to engage in wordplay and look at those two words, often and seldom, to try and defend the indefensible, including Arghya Sengupta, who went to the same university as me, but do not judge people even if they've gone to the same university. And even more bizarrely, my former colleague Barkha Dutt says, justice is not being often demanded because there are no candlelight vigils. Madam, you confuse demand only with candlelight justice and online campaigns. You do grave disrespect to each and every Indian citizen who wants justice for himself or herself when they are on the wrong side of the law. It's a grossly elite proposition that you throw before us, only designed to confuse and detract from the real seriousness, which is quite simply the fact that justice is not delivered in this country to those who are powerless, who are poor, and who are marginalized. The essential point is that those who have influence and access to the system of which the worthy judge was once a part of are the ones who get justice in this country. And we must admit that, and admit it with candor. I am in a gathering with distinguished jurists and lawyers, so I'm a little careful of what I say. But I want to say this today. Not a tale of two cities, but a tale of two journalists must be told to you to understand how this country works. In October, or rather November 2020, a vacation bench of the Supreme Court, headed by the distinguished former Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, sat on a Saturday because Arnab Goswami, another former colleague of mine, who had been arrested, I believe wrongfully, by the Maharashtra government in a case of abetment for suicide and spent all of 6 days in jail. The court opened on a Saturday to ensure Mr. Goswami was given his constitutional freedom. Mr. Chandrachud spoke of liberty at the time. Mr. Goswami had rightly demanded justice as each and every citizen does. The court delivered by granting him bail and his freedom. Well done, I say to the court. But then turned to the case of another journalist, Siddiq Kappan, arrested a month earlier in October 2020 while he was on his way to Hathras to report on the gang rape and death of a 19-year-old Dalit girl. At the time of his arrest, he was working with the Malayalam news portal, was the secretary of the Kerala Union of Working Journalists. Arrested on 2 charges, UAPA and PMLA. He was granted bail in the UAPA case in September 2022, finally released on bail only in February 2023, more than 2 years since his original arrest. Today I ask this august house, what is the difference between Arnab Goswami and a Siddiq Kappan, both of whom and whose families knocked on the courts demanding justice? Quite simply, Mr. Goswami is a recognized face, a prime-time news celebrity anchor. Mr. Kappan was an unknown journalist burdened by his anonymity and, dare I say, his name and religious identity. That, my friends, is the reality of our courts, including our judges who speak loftily about liberty and freedom. Today I ask you, my friends, what is the justice being delivered to Kashmiris arrested under the Public Safety Act, a draconian preventive detention law under which people can be arrested and kept in jail for 2 years without trial or charges? Are you telling me that family members are not demanding justice for them? The fact is the justice is not delivered for them. I ask you again, what indeed is the justice that is delivered to a Father Stan Swami, an octogenarian priest who is arrested under UAPA only because he demanded tribal rights? And what is the delivery of justice in his case when the old man is denied a straw sipper by the courts and denied a straw sipper as an 82-year-old who eventually dies in custody? And contrast him with the Subroto Roy Sahara, who's given special facilities in Tihar jail, Wi-Fi and whatever else he needs. We are a grossly unequal society and our justice mirrors the inequality. The judge who watches me out there knows the state of our legal aid system. He knows how many lawyers actually will appear pro bono for those who are denied access to justice. And that, my friends, is the reality of the topic we are confronted with today. Each and every one of us demands justice for victims. You don't need a candlelight vigil to demand justice. You need a heart and a conscience that believes in the Constitution our founding fathers and mothers gave us. And if you do, then you want equal access to justice above all else. But the fact is, there is an entry barrier. And that entry barrier is what you must focus on when you say justice is seldom delivered. The great Martin Luther King, for example, said, "Justice denied anywhere diminishes justice everywhere." I want to give you a case today, which I believe should settle this argument once and for all. It's the argument and the case, the particularly poignant case of poet and Delhi University professor G.N. Sai Baba. He was dubbed a Naxal sympathizer. He spent 8.5 years in jail, much of it in solitary confinement. In October 2022, he was acquitted by the Bombay High Court, and yet quite extraordinarily, a special sitting of the Supreme Court was called on a Saturday to reverse the acquittal and stay the High Court order. Was G.N. Sai Baba a professor who's 90% disabled? 90% disabled, such a grave risk to society that the court was unwilling to even wait till Monday to hear the matter, that there was such great urgency to send him back to jail. G.N. Sai Baba, my friends, died last year. The years in jail had taken a heavy toll on his body. Is anyone in the opposition or anyone in this audience telling me that his family did not demand justice only because they didn't take out a candlelight vigil? The truth of the matter is they demanded justice, it was not delivered. Are you telling me that the family of Umar Khalid, who for the last 4 years has been in jail in a case which has not even charges been filed, his family does not demand justice? The truth of the matter is the same judges who pronounce loftily in gatherings like this about life and liberty are selective in their wisdom when it comes to the poor and the marginalized. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the reality that must stare us in the face. Yes, and this audience knows it better than anyone else. It was great to see you out on the streets protesting spontaneously on RG Car. And yes, you did demand justice. And yet, to a large extent, you have got justice to the point where the Chief Justice of India even decided to live stream the RG Car case. But I ask you tomorrow, in a country where you have women being raped and murdered in different parts, how many of our judges will live stream cases that have less high-profile publicity? And that, my friends, is the real story of India. Just as we are a grossly unequal society, when 10% of our population accounts for 70% of the income, the truth of the matter is that 10% also has access to the law that the poor and the disadvantaged do not. Which is why the proposition is simply where your conscience must lie. And I appeal to your conscience as people of this great state of Bengal and India. Your conscience must tell you once and for all that we have a broken criminal justice system, whereas a Niti Aayog report said it will take 324 years to clear the backlog of cases in this country. 324 years. I won't be around then. I don't think any of us will be. But this nation must live on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajdeep. That was Rajdeep firing on all cylinders, very passionately, did not mince his words at all to tell us how discriminatory, how unequal, how parochial. You know, I was trying Arnab on the phone. He's a bit busy somewhere else. So Arnab's reaction to Rajdeep will be a matter of the next CDC debate, right? That is a promise. Okay. I know that, yeah. But, you know, you refer to the great, you refer to the people who were discriminated against, and you ended up by referring to the great state of West Bengal. Do consider West Bengal. You know, West Bengal cannot afford these expensive lawyers in Delhi. We are already some 10 lakh crores in debt or something. So, Mr. Singhvi and his colleagues in the Supreme Court, you must give us a discount for future hearings. Because each citizen of West Bengal has a few thousand rupees of debt. Every child born has a debt. And the prices of, lawyers like Mr. Singhvi, Mr. Sybil is really adding to our financial agony.
That's why he's wearing a velvet jacket and I'm wearing...
You did not, yeah, I'm sure you did not. Well, with Rajdeep, we have heard the proposition. And who else to end the matter for the opposition than Akash Banerjee? Akash, podium for you.
Mr. Chair, you talked about Arnab Goswami coming in next time, and that being the matter of debate the next time. I honestly think that you don't need that. I think Rajdeep filled up that portion very well. You could feel that Arnab energy. No, justice system is broken. So ladies and gentlemen, can I just say that taking that pitch down a second, that was not the topic of the debate. We are not talking about per se the justice system is broken. And I really think that Rajdeep has a reason why he was talking about so vehemently and vociferously about the justice system being broken, is because he chooses to deliberately, and much of the proposition chooses to deliberately ignore what the topic is asking us of. It just asks us, justice is often demanded. Not one speaker amongst the illustrious lineup here decided to prove to us that justice is often demanded. Yes, Umar Khalid's family is asking for justice, but that is not India asking for justice. Trust me, I see on YouTube what the algorithm says when I do an episode on Umar Khalid and when I do an episode on Big Boss. So let's just take it one pitch down and break the topic down for the one last time and understand if justice is often demanded, or is justice sometimes demanded and sometimes delivered. That is all that the topic is asking for. Rajdeep talks about the justice system being broken, as if this justice system is living in some sort of vacuum that is supposed to deliver justice irregardless of what society that we are living in. Ladies and gentlemen, we are the product of our society. The judicial system, the politics, the media is the product of the society that we live in, and that is delivering the kind of pressure and the force that is implied on us. Why would Arnab get a bail, and a Siddiqui Kappan is years in jail. And when Arnab comes out, he comes out as a hero, and Siddiqui Kappan slinks into obscurity. Why? You didn't want to celebrate him? He didn't come on top of a car doing namaste to everybody and welcomed as a hero? Guess what? It's we who are not demanding the justice or celebrating the rare cases where justice is even delivered. So can we just take it a notch down on the judicial system? Of course there is a problem with the judicial system, and we'll come to it. Because, again, as was pointed out, that it seems to be a judiciary bashing competition. So Abhishek Manu Singhvi comes in, 1/3 of the high court seats are vacant, 1/4 of the district courts are vacant, crores of cases are pending. So where is the outrage? Where is the pressure? Who is demanding that the justice system be set right? I don't hear any voices. Rajdeep has a problem with candlelight marches. Okay, let's not do candlelight marches, let's do petitions. Let's do media debates. I don't see that happening. But we can come here and say, oh, see, the courts are not delivering. But who's forced the courts not to deliver? We can deliver on a lot of topics. When the public pressurizes the political class, then a lot of delivery is happening. Vrinda Grover comes and talks about Gaza. People are celebrating the deaths that are taking place in Gaza. She's talking about the Bhopal gas tragedy. Guess what? 40 years the poisonous toxins were there. Where was the public pressure? Who was asking for the toxins to be removed? We are only talking about Union Carbide. Are theek hai bhai, Union Carbide got away. What did you do after that? What did you do for 40 years? Where was the pressure? So let's take it one notch down and understand where the problem really lies. And I'll do a small test, because I honestly believe that we need to swallow a little bit of a bitter pill and understand where the problem comes from. And the problem comes from the lack of public awareness, public pressure. Sustained public pressure will get everybody to act. Let's do a small test. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, because this is a test you do with yourself. These are some of the topics that we covered on our YouTube channel, and when we were preparing, just looking at these topics. And I was wondering, why do we do these topics? What happens out of it? So, answer these questions to yourself. What happened to the Hindenburg allegations? What happened to the SBI chief? Do you remember the name of the SBI chief and why she was not investigated? What happened? SEBI chief. What happened to the IS officer who was exposed for coming out with fake certificates, and then this whole media expose started, a lot of it online, on how IS officers were getting in using the economic weaker section, the handicapped criteria? What happened to that whole story? What happened to Pooja Khedkar? What happened to the Agniveer story, where the government is quietly changing the rules and regulations after there was an outrage? What happened to the NEET episode, where we know for a fact that the most prestigious of examinations in this country were leaked? What happened? Did you care about? Or only the students who were appearing for NEET cared about it? What happened to the conditions of our cities? Are we questioning the government? Where did the smart cities go? Are we questioning what happened to the Pune Posha case? Are we questioning Prajwal Revanna? We are hearing about RG Kaur. We covered 4 episodes on that. But that's the problem. We are only worried about, in Kolkata, we are being worried about Kolkata. In South, we are worried about the South cases. How many cases are we rising up as a nation? And you know what? The political class has understood this. They know that within a month or 2 maximum, I can take this pressure. And that is why I think Manipur can continue to burn, because we don't care about Manipur, beyond Manipur and the Northeast. And that is why economic growth is not too much of a concern. I don't see any outrage over the fact that our economic growth is slipping. I don't see people questioning the lack of 8% growth, which is the minimum required. So there is obviously a problem in terms of us getting up and saying enough is enough, let's ask for accountability. And this debate, I'm sorry to say, is not a court bashing debate. When we are talking about justice, let's not forget, Vrinda Grover came and talked about social, economic, political justice, but then she limited herself to the court cases. And therefore, please, I would like you to consider the other forms of justice that is being denied, and we are not working hard for it. I would like to talk about the fact that there is caste injustice that is happening, and we are all part and partaking in this injustice that continues to rise at this point of time. We are talking about gender injustice, where we are even less than Bangladesh in terms of having gender contributions and in the labor force participation. We are talking about economic justice. 1% is holding 40% of the wealth. Where is the outrage? Where is the anger? Where is asking the government is what is going on, why there is lack of an understanding of why the rich are getting richer and poor are getting poorer. The Places of Worship Act is something that is very, very worrying in terms of religious equality. The government could just go ahead and repeal Places of Worship Act at this point of time. There is no opposition that is going to be there. So let's understand that we also are responsible for what is happening. On the RG Kaur case, I'd like to bite the bullet and put this question in front of you. How many people think that in India, I'm not talking about Kolkata, that you had more outrage over what is happening in Bangladesh than what is happening with RG Kaur? Because I saw, at least on the social media, on a national scale, media scale, a much bigger outrage. How many people think that Sushant Singh Rajput, that case occupied a lot more mind space than what has happened in RG Kaur? How many people think that Babar and Aurangzeb today get a lot more mind space than RG Kaur? How many people think that Big Boss and who should be eliminated from the house of Big Boss gets more mind space than RG Kaur? So there have been cases, long-term protests, the farmer protest for once. But I think the act of asking a question, discrediting people who ask a question, has been the biggest event in the last few years. And because we have been trained that anybody who is asking a question, raising their voice, and I'm not talking about Kolkata, because it's definitely happening in the rest of the country, is anti-national, is anti-social, is a Soros-funded agent. And unless and until we get over this and get back to accountability, putting those questions back to the government, justice will not be delivered. But we have to put the pressure to get that justice delivered. Thank you.
Akash, thank you. That was a very, very serious set of questions that needs to be asked and probably not being asked. Now, to get to the 8% growth rate, I think we have to consume a lot of caramel popcorn given the current tax rates. On that token, are you ready? Who has a question for Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi?
This is Shisha Banerjee from St. Xavier's College, Kolkata. Sir, could you please justify how you related the issue of Tariq pe Tariq with the problem of judicial vacancy that you portrayed as the main source behind non-delivery of justice?
Well, this is one of the facets. I gave almost 10 or 12 parameters, but certainly you can have all the best glittering equipment and the best hospitals and buildings. If you don't have doctors, how do you treat patients? So Tariq pe Tariq means that each date when the person stands up, and this happens every day to practitioners like us, and the judge says, today I have 70 matters, I have no time. Not to me, not to another lawyer, but to the client, to an aged person, to an above 80 person, then it is because a single judge has too many matters. And he has too much on his plate to give a date other than 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line. That is all that it means. So you need more manpower. 50 judges per million of population is the minimum you should have. You crawled up to 21.
Thank you. We'll take a question for Arghya. Who has a question for Mr. Arghya Sengupta?
My name is Agnish Chatterjee. Sir, you mentioned how the Nirbhaya case was in fact a cry for barbarism and not a cry for justice. So the very foundation of the Nirbhaya case was built upon the people's demand for justice. And according to the Aristotelian definition that you mentioned in your speech, it's treating the unequal unequally. I can assure that person staying in Kolkata had no personal benefit by convicting or from the arresting of the rapists. They wanted justice. They wanted the unequal to be treated unequally.
Thanks very much. I think we make a mistake quite often when we think about justice as harsh punishment. And I think this is the mistake the folly that we often fall to. And you're absolutely right that the demand, and I think everyone here feels that demand comes from a good place. And that demand comes from a place that there should be fair treatment. There is no doubt about that. But how that demand manifests is in terms of ask for the death penalty. This is how it manifests all the time. And this is how the political class also sees it for a very simple reason. This is a stroke of pen solution. You can just say that for now all cases with rape and murder there will be death penalty. What is the more difficult solution? And what that demand should be. The difficult solution is what Dr. Singhvi was talking about. How can we increase our judges? How can we ensure that there are toilets for women in the district courts? How can we ensure that judges are turning up on time? These don't have stroke of pen solutions. But I would agree with you only on the day when I find that these questions that this side of the house has talked about become electoral issues. When is it an electoral issue that the poor are not delivering justice? When is it an electoral issue, what Rajdeep said, that Siddiq Kappan is in jail for 3 years? When is that an electoral issue? When is it an electoral issue that Arnab Goswami is getting justice and Siddiq Kappan is not? Till these are electoral issues and till these become things that we talk about in general everyday life, these are not demands for justice. They may start from a very good and noble place, but they manifest into something completely different. So we can't say here, as Rajdeep said, that Umar Khalid's family is demanding justice. Every family is demanding justice. That way, let's not debate this question. Because every family, of course, will demand justice for their family member. The question is that as a society, when do we demand for justice? And as he said, you can see that when Arnab Goswami gets celebrated when he comes out of jail and Siddiq Kappan quietly goes back home. That is where our society is.
Interjection for Vrinda.
Ma'am, due to today's headlines of the Supreme Court refusing an actual demand to recognize same-sex marriages, which entails the blatant denial of a basic right, how do you support speaking for a motion where the delivery of justice has a positive connotation?
I think the motion that I am advocating here is that the demand is made. And actually, thank you for this example, because this will then help my friends understand what we are saying. Who went to court? Many couples, individuals, groups of trans persons, lesbians, gays, asking for what? For the same parity that heterosexuals enjoy of recognition of marriage. And that is what they asked the court to give them. But it was denied. And that came in review, which is what you're reading now. The judgment had come over a year ago. And this was again an occasion. And what led to the decriminalization of homosexual, consensual adult homosexuality, and now seeking of marriage equality, has been a very large, vibrant movement across this country by persons of different sexual orientation and gender identity. The failure to award justice and hope in the future that the courts will catch up for what rights are being advocated is what the proposition is about.
Thanks, Vrinda. Interjection for Barkha.
My name is Bhasha Bhattacharya. The fire of the victim never burns out, and they put every effort to keep the public looking at them, as we have seen in the Arghya case just a few days ago in the march. Why does the media not put an equal effort to ensure that the issue doesn't die out? Why does the media that shapes the public mind allow a scope for mass amnesia?
Thank you for that question. I'm glad you've brought up the role of media, because when I was listening to my former colleague Rajdeep, I was thinking This is the exact way the media confuses noise with the demand for justice. शोर मचा लो, जोर से बोल लो, shout down the other side, mock them, bring up candlelight vigils that were never referenced, and present yourself as very passionate, let's not argue on fact, and then go back and work in a television environment where anchor after anchor every night vilifies the same Omar Khalid and the same Siddiq Kappan, and they are your colleagues, Rajdeep. On the media, let's talk about the media. RG Core, please check my platform Mojo story. Akash said he's done 4 stories. I have done at least 300 reports and counting, till the very last development in the case. I'm not saying I always do a good job. I'm not saying I'm always consistent. I think the point I'm trying to make is that we're all part of the problem and we're potentially all part of the solution. And if we want to have an honest conversation about what is justice, justice and the pursuit of justice takes hard work. It's about institution building, it's about institution rebuilding, but those are not headline-making polemical arguments that the media wants to talk about. They're considered boring, they're not considered TRP-worthy on our television channels. Justice and the real pursuit of justice is about consistency. And therefore, I agree with you that the media, all of us, should do a better job. But you make my point for me, my young friend, when I say we cannot give up midway. This is about uprooting some of our institutions, bringing them down to rebuild them again. Until we want to have that conversation, we're just lying to ourselves and to our young friends here.
I am Sampurna Sanyal. So, ma'am, it's clearly understood that you're aware of the cases which prolonged for 20 years or 15 years, and you have mentioned it and you've cited a lot of examples. But those are clear shots of judicial delay. So how are you bringing it into the justice? Because clearly it overlapped your own points. So what's your definition upon this? Thank you.
Okay, I really like the question, and it's very nice that I see a young debater. I almost am on your side. But to answer this question, we all know a proverb that justice, if delayed, is denied. So if we are subjected to long waits for any cases, which can't be our targeted goal, we are actually denying justice. In case of RJ Kaur, which I put forward, there were 5 long months and we are still waiting on streets, sometimes demonstrating, and we are just looking forward and hoping for justice so that we can actually look forward and say that, okay, we've got a punishment. And the punishment doesn't have to be a death penalty right away. If our judiciary can give us a better punishment, we might be happy with it too. Better punishment, more grave punishment than a death penalty, which can be an exemplary thing for the society. We will welcome that. You know, once my mother said that, oh, everywhere we go, people are spitting here and there. So next time, if there can be a law where we ask them to clean the spit by actually, with their own tongue, they might stop. That is not a death penalty. That is not even like a lot of money involved. But when I look back, I think it can be something that can actually make a change. So it's about change. It's about not waiting very long for justice. And if we are waiting for justice, that is equal to denying it.
Reekkanya, thanks. Point taken. Question for Sanjib. Justice Banerjee.
Good evening, sir. I'm Ishan Banerjee. So, you basically spoke about positive discrimination and justice being creation of opportunities in the country. But if creation of opportunities is justice, then the number of times that is demanded for clearly falls short of the number of times it is misused after being created. So, what is the model of justice, or what is actually just in the Indian scenario, let's say in the making of a policy or a law or the judiciary? What is that alternate model that you are suggesting today for this debate?
Thanks.
Thank you, Ishan. There's no alternate model that I'm suggesting. What I'm saying is the system has to be made more efficient. If we stick by the narrow meaning of the topic, which is the judiciary, it has to be made more efficient, more accountable, and most surprising of all, that system also has to be just. And believe you me, for someone who has suffered for standing up to his principles, I tell you that system within is not just.
We do take your point. A lot of honesty and a lot of pain, I think, is mixed over there.
I hope with a bit of humility too.
Yes, indeed, Sanjib. Thank you ever so much. Question for Rajdeep.
Good evening, sir. This is Devdeep Tore of St. Xavier's Collegiate School. I think by this juncture of the debate, it is well established that those members of society demand for such justice which is relevant to them. And even in the example you brought up about Mr. Sadiq Thappan, about his family members demanding for justice, whereas all of the other members of society turn a blind eye, maybe because of whatever reasons. Then
make it brief.
There's an attack on the judicial system as well. But if it is this society which itself is flawed and not purely looking for justice, as Mr. Sengupta mentioned, then how is it that we can say that justice is demanded by society?
Please show me, young man, and also members of the opposition, where is the word society mentioned in this topic? You have tried to deliberately confuse and do what I call is a WMD, a weapon of mass distraction. Show me where society word is mentioned. You are putting the burden, Mr. Akash Banerjee is putting the burden on society. You must rise up. You must. Where in that topic is the word society mentioned, public mentioned? I maintain, my young friend, everyone who is on the wrong side of the, who's a victim of the law demands justice. Look at the number of cases in our courts. That's because we still have some faith and hope in the courts. That's why people go and knock on the doors of justice. So please do not fall into the trap that they have thrown on you by adding a word society and public which doesn't exist. The topic does not say justice is often demanded by society but seldom delivered. Justice is demanded by the citizens of this country, and each and every citizen has the right to demand justice. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a Bumrah-like delivery to the opposition. Last question to Akash. Quick.
Good evening, sir. I am Abhinav Chatterjee. You spoke about people not having or people not demanding justice enough. But I can assure you that in India, as we speak in this debate right now, there are thousands screaming for justice. But the ultimate truth is that in India, to get your voice heard, you need power and truth, a combination that is rarely found in our country and contemporary world. So how can you even defend your stance in this matter?
It's very ideological. It's very hopeful to believe that this country is screaming and shouting for justice. I don't want to tell you that you are wrong. But when you will start reporting, when you will start seeing how the society responds, you know, social media is very brutal. It will tell you who's watching what, when, how long, and where they are tuning off. You know, people get very amazed when I ask them which is the most watched television show in the history of India. And they sometimes try to come up with maybe, you know, Hum Log or KBC. And they're very distraught when they get to know it's Big Boss for 18 or 16 years in a row. So when you tell me that there is the masses who are screaming for justice, I want to see exactly where that mass is. Yes, there have been instances. The farmer agitation is one such. So when there is that kind of sustained pressure, RG Kaur is a very good example, but it's 150 days. Do you think that 150 days will move a government? Maybe not. Maybe 11 months will. So you have to understand, where is this call for justice coming from? Is it coming from Twitter? Is it coming from trending? What is your barometer of public screaming for justice, asking for justice? Because in my understanding is that had it been so, we would have had a far more accountable polity, we would have had a far more accountable judiciary. And as Rajdeep is pointing out, justice where is it written society? Then I can also ask, where is it written courts? Because it is written justice. Neither is it said judicial justice is often demanded and seldom delivered. Or, oh, why are we not talking about US justice? Because India is also not written. Why are we talking about India? It's not written here. So, in all their wisdom, the organizers had this topic, a broad one.
Thank you, Akash. And thank you, Akash. And you happen to mention US justice. So even though you see the evening is advancing and a combination of hypoglycemia and hypothermia is not good for the audience, I am tempted. And I am tempted to borrow 3 more minutes for you, because we have amongst us what I called the surprise for this evening, Professor Don Maguire, an authority on criminology and criminal justice from the University of St. Louis, and currently the visiting professor in NUJS. Professor, 3 minutes of your critique of what you have heard. A big hand goes out to the visiting professor from NUJS, Professor Maguire. Professor, please.
Thank you so much for having me here this evening. It's an honor to be part of this. And to make comments after this illustrious crew is a hard act to follow, to say the least. I'm obviously bringing the US justice system perspective here. I'm a former prosecutor, I have a PhD in criminology and criminal justice, and systemic bias is my area of research emphasis. So I could relate to a lot of what you were saying. The CJ system in the US has the same problem. Racial injustice, disproportionate minority confinement, the disproportionate shooting of African American men by police officers, and the wealthy and the poor do not get the same justice in the US either. And certainly you painted a bit of a bleak picture. Unbelievable backlogs, unreasonable delays, low arrest and conviction rates, and a serious problem with judicial infrastructure, lacking the resources. And these are serious problems. But I also saw some hope. The RJ Carr case, I heard about that in St. Louis when it happened. And I'm here to tell you, we don't get that much news about Calcutta in St. Louis. So you were loud, we heard you, I think the world heard. And if you are any indication of what the youth think, I think that kind of passion will bring change. And I think that you've got a lot to be proud of on that score. So I think there is the momentum, there's the impetus, and so I think that is very hopeful. Also, there's going to be a verdict, I think on the 18th, right? Coming from the US system to have a verdict in a capital case in less than 6 months is amazing. Now, it looks like there's still some work to be done. There's a tampering case that's still out there. It looks like there may be more than one perpetrator involved, so I'm not saying it's done, but at least there's been some effort, some progress. So, I also wanted to say that while increasing rape rates seem troubling, that actually might be good news. We know there is a huge problem, the dark figure of crime with regards to sex offenses where people don't report. It's a problem globally. A study out of Yale recently suggests that there's a 16% increase globally in rape reporting rates since the Me Too movement. And I think that's because women are beginning to feel empowered. And until women feel empowered to complain about their victimization, there's no way justice can be delivered. So thank you very much for inviting me to be here. It was an honor.
Professor Maguire, thank you very much. And I'm sure the US justice system is very generous, because only recently it has spared its president a jail sentence before the inauguration. So we live in hope. I think, it's like the pot calling the kettle black. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, the debate draws to its final 10 minutes. And we invite the summing up speech from the opposition first, Akash Banerjee, to sum up for the opposition. And it's your time to make your mind up, because in 10 minutes, the House will be voting. Akash.
When you vote in 10 minutes, don't vote based on what sounds cool. You know, given a choice, I think everybody on the first go would have selected for the motion. Sounds nice, na? Yeah, we of course demand justice and it is not given to us. But just think a little deeper why this topic was chosen for this debate today. Because the topic is asking us. It is asking us a question about justice, our understanding of justice, and do we demand enough of it? The opposition would like to say no. The opposition would like to say that the proposition here has just come in and talked about the court system. The court system is the product of our society, and the society is not asking for adequate amount of justice. Rajdeep comes here and again at the end of the debate in the question answer round says, no, we are only talking about judicial justice. While 4 speakers in their definitions never talked about the first line, justice is often demanded. Why is this realization late in the day? Is because they have just taken the superficial part of this debate and said, oh, look, the courts are not working. We are so nice people. We do this discussion about justice every day at 9 o'clock on our television. We do this justice every day in courts. It's only the judicial system that is letting this country down. Baki sab changa si hai. This is what we are saying is flawed in its own belief. So when you vote for this, understand this. When you vote for this, ask yourself, do you honestly ask for justice for others? Or does it pinch you when it is only justice for yourself? Because we put out a rule on our channel saying anybody asking for any episode can't ask it for themselves. My episode, my examination, my job. No, you have to ask it for others. Are we asking justice for others, the underprivileged? Perhaps not. The fragmentation of action, the fragmentation of the fact that after 5 days we move on to another point of anger. After 10 days we will move on to another fact is something that we have to accept. There is a clear problem in our country's judicial system. There is no doubt about that. And that is why the topic also says seldom delivered. Nobody is saying justice has never been delivered and some of these episodes have been taken. Of course, justice is seldom delivered. The question is, are we asking about it often enough? Are we forcing the judicial system? We haven't seen the proof of concept, of examples, of often this pressure being mounted. What I would like to see in the concluding speech from Mr. Singhvi is when he can give us concrete proof that justice is being pressed upon. We are asking for social justice. We are asking for economic justice. We are asking for political justice. We are asking for religious justice. Tell me where, in which field are we asking all of this? Or are we just saying that, bhai, as long as we are safe, as long as our interests are safe? Is that justice or is that selfishness? So when you vote for that, please remember, we are talking about an issue larger than
Akash,
the courts.
you've got a minute. You've got a minute.
Yeah. We are asking about issues which are larger than just the courts. We are asking about social justice. We are asking about economic justice. Why is it that we are celebrating the haves and absolutely ignoring the not haves? Why is it that we are okay with the fact that 80 crore people are on ration? Why is it that people who are not well off are being told by the media that no, we are Vishwaguru, you should be happy about it. Your chaddi might be gone, but as long as India's image is okay, you should not complain. While as a fact that our passport rankings are also going down. So the fact is, where is this demand for socio-economic, political, religious and judicial
We've got
justice?
To conclude, Akash,
so ask that, and when you vote for that, please ask yourself that while you're voting. Many thanks.
Thank you, Akash. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the last 5 minutes before you make your mind up, the leader of the proposition, Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, pleads in front of you that justice is often demanded but seldom delivered. Sir.
Mr. Chair, this is not a summation, it is a rejoinder. And more cases are won and lost on rejoinders than on the opening. I would never like a house as august and intelligent as this to say, in effect, by voting against by voting with the opposition, to say in effect that justice is seldom demanded, as many have argued that side, and when demanded, it is frequently delivered. What a bizarre proposition. My friends know that this proposition in favor of the motion is axiomatic. They know it. So they adopt 4 or 5 remarkable, unbelievable and bizarre techniques. Technique number 1, they indulge in the worst kind of semantic slicing. Word play which will make Alice in Wonderland blush. Baal ki khal utarna, make lawyers blush, na baal bachegi, na khal bachegi. They have then taken the path of also splicing the topic. According to my very learned and distinguished friend Barkha Dutt, the theme is justice is often demanded is the proposition, full stop. A second debate is justice is seldom delivered. That's a separate debate. It's not one theme, it's not one sentence according to her. Now let me very quickly tell you, Mr. Sengupta starts by making 2 interesting points. He says, and by the way, not one on their side, except the noble and learned Mr. Akash, have interpreted the topic to mean other than delivery system of justice by the judiciary. Not Mr. Banerjee, not Ms. Barkha Dutt, not Ms. Arghya Sengupta. So their own side doesn't believe in the reinterpretation of the topic by Mr. Akash. But anyway, Mr. Arghya starts by saying that justice is not demanded. What is demanded is vengeance and benefit. Where does he get it from? But remember, the individual who goes to court, who cries for his pension, who cries for the accused to be punished, is demanding justice, even though in the process of delivery of justice it satisfies his vengeance or gets him benefit. That's a part of the justice process. That is why and how we prevent anarchy. And of course, rightly, if only lawyers like us are engaged, that proves my point. He makes my point. If expensive lawyers alone will ensure delivery of justice, that's precisely the proposition we are making. Then, of course, the clear contradiction. Justice Banerjee contradicts Ms. Barkha Dutt. He says, of course there has been delivery. All the progress in 75 years, economic, social, political, is delivery. Well, then you have to decide, and I would rest my case by quoting the last part of Justice Banerjee. We need 1,80,000. We need, and remember, if the system can't deliver justice to a judge, as we all know how and when and why, how do you expect it to deliver justice to society? He certainly never got justice. Now, there is an extraordinary argument of collective outrage. Unless and until I overthrow the government, according to Mr. Akash, this proposition should not be voted in favor of. Individual vindication is not demand of justice and is not delivery of justice. Collective outrage must be there. We must burn down buildings. In a democracy, I must put my hand in your throat and take out my right. Well, I don't know which definition or which coffee he is drinking or which ivory tower he is living in. Of course there is outrage at the SEBI chief. Of course there is outrage at the IAS lady who faked everything. Of course there is outrage at Hindenburg. Of course there is outrage in Nirbhaya. And. But that outrage doesn't mean that justice is not demanded unless we get up and overthrow our elected government. You have to wait, you have to shout, you have to do maybe candlelight vigils or non-candlelight vigils. You can go to court. The collective part is all that is looked at in the redefinition of the project, of the theme, to suit the opposition. And friends, therefore I submit that the whole approach is to distort the theme, to redefine the theme selfishly and self-centeredly, and to make semantic hair splitting about justice not being demanded unless people as a collectivity get up. That is far from what was intended to be debated. You cannot but vote for the motion because the motion alone can set the course for the future reform of what is broken.
Thank you, Dr. Manu Singhvi. I'm ever so relieved that I am not voting because every 10 minutes, like many of you, I was absolutely convinced listening to the speaker who was making a very sincere, a very pointed and a very passionate point. But time has come for you to decide. And those of you who are in agreement with Orko, with Akash, with Sanjib, with Barkha, that you are voting for the opposition to the motion, please put your hands up. Thank you. It's been a heated debate, but rather arctic conditions for Kolkata. Thank you. Those of you who believe that you still maintain your faith with the proposition that the motion that justice is often demanded but seldom delivered, you agree with the motion and the proposition, please put your hands up. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been a fantastic audience. It's been a pleasure having you, and the motion is carried. Thank you. Good evening.